Welcome to today's Lunch Hour Legal Marketing webinar. I'm Jared Correa, the Assistant Director and Senior Law Practice Advisor at Mass Law Map, and we provide, as many of you know, free and confidential law practice management consulting services if you're a Massachusetts attorney. If not, I suppose you're out of luck. Now, either you're listening live or you've tuned into our podcast via Legal Talk Network. But regardless of who you are or where you are, we're happy you're able to join us today. Today, we're going to talk about internet marketing, and we're going to hear from Fred Cohen of Zola Creative. And we're very pleased to have him here today. Before we get started, I'll just give you a little bit of housekeeping. If you're not a presenter on this call, your telephone or computer audio is muted. So we're going to take questions via the chat function on Zoom meeting. If you've got a question, fire it in, and I will rudely interrupt Fred and get that question to him. So don't be shy. Fire questions away. We'll make this as interactive as possible. Fred will probably go for about 45 minutes as far as the presentation is concerned. And from there, we'll wrap up and you'll have a chance to ask any questions that were unasked during the live portion of the presentation. So, Fred, I will leave it to you to provide an introduction of yourself and Zola, and you can jump right into it. So thanks again for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jared. I'm very excited to be doing this. So as you said, I'm the founder and president of Zola Creative, and we've been working with law firms for about 8 years now. And we have law firms that we're serving all around the country, big and small, and we try to create really powerful, impactful websites for them, as well as content and marketing and messaging and really the whole package that's involved in terms of creating an effective online presence for them. So I'm going to start this presentation with a short review of the ABA model rules, because I'm going to be just touching on some attorney advertising related concepts. Now, with respect to the ABA model rules, of course, they're not binding unless they're adopted by the specific states. And as of now, there are 49 states that have adopted the ABA model rules. So to the extent, of course, that they are adopted, they're binding. And, you know, there are certain things that are aspirational and there are certain things that are enforceable. And one thing you need to keep in mind is with California, as with a lot of other things, it kind of has its own version that's significantly different than the ABA model rules. So that's something you need to be aware of. It doesn't closely follow the model rules as do many other states like New York. Okay. And I always like to start off with this quote from the ABA. It's become less relevant nowadays just because it seems like pretty much everyone is convinced that having an effective online presence is critical for the success of your firm. So, you know, there isn't much convincing to do anymore, even with some of the skeptics that used to exist. Okay, so a couple of reasons you want to have a website. Number one, obviously, it can help you gain more clients. It's an opportunity for you to kind of showcase your expertise and enhance your credibility. A lot of times you might get referrals. So this for what we call referral validation. A lot of times you'll still get checked out before the person goes ahead and contacts you and your firm. And also it's an opportunity for you to kind of exercise some control and dominion over the information that might be out there about you or your practice. So there might be some pesky grievance matters or you know, certain online reviews, or you might have made campaign contributions. So if you have a website, chances are it's going to come up pretty high in the search results if somebody's searching for you. And again, it's a place where you have control over the information that's published about you. So take advantage of it. Okay. So I'm going to be talking essentially in 4 different sections today, starting with design. And you know, a lot of folks are, you know, very hyper rational, and sometimes they can be dismissive of the value of design. and ignore the kind of like the science that's really behind that's behind a lot of the decisions we make with respect to visuals. So to illustrate that, we're going to play what I call a game of chicken, but not this game of chicken, a different game of chicken. So this was a study that was conducted with diners, and they were presented with two pictures of chickens. One on the left, as you can see, let's say, isn't as attractive, and the one on the right is, very sexy and beautiful. And they were told that the chicken on the left is tasty. They didn't make any comments about what the chicken looks like or anything, and they said the chicken on the right is natural and healthy. And overwhelmingly, the diner said that they wanted natural and healthy chicken. So they did the same thing again, except they swapped the labels on the chicken. And this time they said that the less attractive chicken is natural and healthy, and the chicken to the right is the tasty one. And again, overwhelmingly, the diners selected the tasty chicken. And when they were told to justify their decisions, they said, well, you know what? They kind of gave non-visual reasons. They said, you know what? I'm interested in the taste, or some people will point to the fact that they're looking to eat healthy. So the effect was almost subliminal on them. So it's not just about having something that's visually attractive. It's about being remarkable. I'm not sure if many of you folks follow Seth Godin. He talks about the driving in the countryside, and there are pastures to your right and to your left, and there are black cows and white cows and Holsteins, and after some time, you're driving, the cows become invisible, and until you come across the purple cow, you don't notice them anymore. So what can we do, to our marketing to kind of be that purple cow that stands out? So this is, of course, really important because now, as consumers, we have more and more choices than we ever did before, and we have less and less time. So it's really, really important to be able to capture your audience's attention as soon as possible, as early as possible, with something that's really captivating and different and remarkable. Okay, so your website is unremarkable if the layout, if it's just kind of like stacks of rectangles, or if you have that conservative color scheme, like navies and maybe maroons, or gold, or maybe a rich green color. So, you're not going to really stand out. If your website's lacking visual tension, I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's kind of like presenting visuals in a way that is slightly different than you expected. And of course, you want to avoid legal cheese, which is that stuff. Because, they can figure out pretty quickly that you're an attorney, and so many attorney websites nowadays have that kind of imagery, and you're really not going to be remarkable and stand out if you're relying on those concepts. So I'll show you some designs that we've done to kind of to help lawyers be remarkable, but at the same time communicate their expertise. This is a site that we've done for a very prestigious financial litigator. And we use the concept of a three-handed chessboard. Financial litigation is a challenging game. Put a consistent winner on your side. So that's one way to do it. This is a site that we're doing for a firm that represents identity theft victims. And incidentally, this happens to be purple, but this could be any color. We use spot coloring, which means we kind of make most of the background black and white, and then we use tints of a particular color. In this case, we picked purple. Again, it's a color that stands out, and of course, that fish is just, you immediately perk up and take notice. What is that saying? I'll show you some other slides from this this attorney's website. So guard against financial predators. Again, you see the shark, school of fish around it. Not something you would normally expect on an attorney website. Level the playing field. There's turtle climbing on top of the other. And you could use metaphors. So this is one we did for a firm in Atlanta, and essentially they're using the metaphor of a knot with very bright colors that really pop. And of course, you can use language. So there's not a website that we did. This is Morrison Foerster. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's a big firm, big international law firm, and you know, a lot of smaller firms maybe necessarily wouldn't have the confidence to use this as a tagline, but it certainly is captivating, and you know, accomplishes its objective in that regard. Okay, so now we're going to come to section 2, search engine optimization. And search engine optimization is essentially everything that you do to convince the search engines that your website should come up higher on their search result pages when somebody performs a search. So if your website is effectively search engine optimized, obviously you're going to get a lot of relevant traffic. And incidentally, SERPs is an acronym for search engine result pages. You can impress somebody with that. Okay, so before you do any kind of search engine optimization, you kind of need to step back and think about, you know, what are the keywords that people are searching with, and you know, what kind of content you need to have on your website so that search engines can present your website when somebody's doing those kinds of searches. So typically, you want to do some version of your practice areas with some combination of your geolocations and as well as your profession. So a classic example would be, you know, personal injury attorney in Omaha, let's say, and you could do those in different permutations. Now things have gotten a little bit more complicated because if the user doesn't enter in a geolocation term, search engines, of course, can use your IP address to figure out approximately where you're located, and they can present websites that have a local presence in that geolocation near your IP address. So there are things you can do within your website to enhance that signal to the search engines in terms of where your location is, in addition to just having the important geolocation keywords. And then with respect to practice areas, there's a lot that you can do, and I'll speak about that in a little bit. If you want to get ideas for keywords to find, and a lot of times laypersons will find kind of colloquial, non-technical keywords to search for a particular type of attorney, and as attorneys, sometimes we're not cognizant of those terms. So one thing you can do is if you just sign up for a free AdWords account on Google, they have a keyword tool where essentially you enter a keyword or a set of keywords, and it's going to suggest similar keywords that users might use to find that kind of service. Okay, so there are two categories of search engine optimization. The first type of search engine optimization is everything that you're doing on your own website. Hence, it's called on-site optimization or on-page optimization. And depending on where certain keywords are located within your website, it can communicate stronger or weaker signals to the search engine as to what the subject matter of your site is, and that has a big impact on where it might appear on a search result page. So if you have important keywords in your domain name, that's a very strong signal that your website or a page on your website is very relevant for a particular search query containing those keywords. And the analogy that I make is to that of a book. Kind of domain name could be title. So back in the day when you were actually doing your research in the library and the subject matter that you were researching happens to be the title of the book, you would immediately pull it off the shelf. And kind of like the search engines kind of use a similar methodology. Then there are other important hotspots, such as the page title. And the page title is is not what you think in the content area, although that does send some strong signals too, but it's actually the section that's in the browser bar all the way on top. So it would say something like Google Chrome, and it's the same place where that's listed. It's just previous to that. So the technical name for it is a meta title. So if you're working with a webmaster, you want to make sure that your page titles are highly optimized with those keywords that we just discussed, the practice area keywords, the geolocation keywords, and the profession keywords, the profession being attorney, lawyer, or law firm. Incidentally, Google's gotten so smart, they call it semantic search, so it has a lot of artificial intelligence. You used to need to kind of feed it, attorney, lawyer, and law firm. You don't really need to do that anymore. So whatever your preference is, if you use the word attorney, the search engines know that it's synonymous with lawyer. Incidentally, I mentioned Google just because it has, about 75% market share. I generally use it synonymously with a search engine. So if you hear me say that, most everything that is effective for optimizing with Google will be just as effective with Bing, which also runs Yahoo search. Another element on your website is a menu system that you have. That might be a menu bar on the top, or some websites have a menu bar on the left side, and that's analogous to a table of contents. So if you have, again, important keywords, so if you have, you break down your practice areas, let's say if you're doing estate planning, let's say you include in that incapacity planning, estate tax planning, wills, trusts, the different aspects of what an estate planning attorney does. Each of those pages and each of the links to those pages would send a very strong signal to the search engines. And then finally, there's something called a sitemap, which can be visible or not visible. It's essentially just an index of all the pages on your website, and that's kind of fed to the search engines, and the search engines use that to determine what all the pages are on your website and where they're located. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about off-site search engine optimization. And these are things that are in some ways outside of your direct control, because it's not the information that's on your own website, but what are the other sites online saying about your website, and what are they communicating about the relevance or quality of the information that exists on your site. So this has become a big component of effective search engine optimization, because it's gotten too easy for a lot of savvy website operators to optimize their websites for particular keywords, and in fact, sometimes they've kind of abused it in some ways that kind of maybe overstates their relevance. So one of the things that Google did when they started, which was very innovative, which is essentially they used a voting system online to determine what the quality of your content is, and essentially they use links to determine that. So if you have a lot of inbound links from third-party websites linking to your website, not from your website, but to your website, Google sees each one of those links as a vote on the authoritativeness of your website. If you think about, for example, a site like NewYorkTimes.com, and there is an article about immigration law, and you're an immigration attorney, and you are, you have a quote in there, and maybe there's a link to your website in that article. That link from New York Times will transfer a lot of authority to your website. The authority is determined by the size of the dotted line, and also it has a lot of topical relevance, and that's determined by the solid line. And therefore, the total link value, which is presented or represented by the gray circle, that's sending a lot of value to your website in terms of both authority and topical. You might have a link, let's say on Food Network for whatever reason. Maybe you're an amateur chef, and somehow you mentioned, and there's a link coming to your website. So the topical relevance is very small, but of course the authority is very large. But that doesn't help you that much. It still helps because there is a highly authoritative website linking to yours, but that's not optimal. And the converse of that is, if you have a link from maybe a colleague of yours that's an attorney, maybe he just threw up his website, he isn't that well known yet, his own website doesn't have a lot of links coming to it, so you have topical relevance, again that's represented by the big circle, but there's not a lot of authority that the website has, so the total link value is still not very significant. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take advantage of it, or that it's useless, but it just kind of helps you focus on kind of trying to get the most high value links as possible for your website. Okay. Black hat SEO. This is essentially what either site operators themselves or people that they hire do to kind of optimize their search rankings in ways that the search engines see as being tantamount to cheating. So one of the older techniques that they used to do was called keyword stuffing, which is essentially to repeat the same phrase, like personal injury attorney, personal injury attorney, personal injury. They used to do that in like a white font with a white background. So that was kind of like a very easy cheat that the search engines got wind of very early on. And incidentally, if you engage in these kinds of activities, you get de-indexed, which is kind of like your website going into purgatory online. So you're not going to come up in any search results. There are other techniques which are kind of like pass-through pages where maybe your website presents certain type of content to the search engine when it's crawling your website, but to a regular user they would see completely different type of content. And again, search engines have gotten smart and they can figure all these things out. Sometimes, very savvy kind of hacker type individuals will find some vulnerability with the search engines or some exploit to kind of get you some quick rankings. But invariably, the search engines find out about them and they will penalize sites that are utilizing those types of techniques. Before I move on, let me just talk a little bit more about practice area keywords. So again, this is a really big topic. If you have again any kind of practice, you want to show that you're very serious about it. You don't want to say, "Hi, I'm Fred Cohen. I'm a great lawyer. Please come hire me," and just have a bullet list of of your practice areas. You want to devote at least one page of content to every kind of like subcategory of each practice area. So if you're doing immigration, you want to do it for each type of visa or deportation defense. And you really want to kind of go into depth with each of those. And if you have video FAQs, those are fantastic. Regular FAQs are great too. And those tend to perform very well with search engines. So whatever your practice is, if you're doing personal injury for different types of injuries, for different types of accidents, again, you want to make sure you have a full page dedicated to each of those. And that not only helps with search, it also really helps resonate with potential clients that are looking to retain you because you're addressing something that is totally spot on with respect to what their what their issue is or what the problem that needs to be solved. Another thing you need to do to resonate is mention the types of clients you represent. Do you represent franchisees? Do you represent restaurant owners? Specifically mention the type of clients, and if you can get testimonials. Obviously, this is an ethics issue. They need to be you need to get written consent, and it can't be generally for a matter that is still pending. But that'll go a long way, and you can kind of strategically put them. So if you have a page devoted to a particular practice area where a particular category of clients are represented, you might want to strategically place a testimonial from that company, or at least say that, if you represented a well-known client, again, if you have permission, you can put their business name or individual name to highlight that fact. Other types of success stories include, obviously, if you've been able to get compensation or large recoveries for individuals, or any kind of outstanding outcome you've been able to achieve on behalf of your client. Make sure you state that on your website. Of course, again, be aware of ethical issues. Most states require you to state that that you might not be able to achieve the same result for them, for their specific situation. And some states, including Florida, actually require the site visitor to acknowledge that before even seeing the success stories. So some states are very strict in terms of presenting that kind of information. So speaking of disclaimers, obviously you want to have an overarching disclaimer that the information, is not legal advice, that it's not intended to be legal advice, and it's essentially just general information, and that they should consult an attorney, for their specific situation. And that should generally be accessible on every page. Some states require some version of attorney advertising disclaimer, like New York requires attorney advertising. Some states require this is an advertisement, and some states have specific font size requirements with respect to having that disclaimer. So just check your own state ethics guidelines. Claims of specialty. This is another kind of a problem I noticed on a lot of websites, and it doesn't have to use the word specialty or we specialize in. So any kind of synonym that implies that, you have to be careful that you either, if your state actually does certifications, you have a certification, then you can mention that, or you can say that you specialize in that area. Or let's say if it's something federal, let's say you're admitted to the patent bar, you can make those claims. If you practice in multiple states, many states require that if you do mention a specialty and you have been certified in a particular state, you have to state which state that you've been certified in, so that somebody from another state sees that, they can clearly tell that your certification was not necessarily from the state in which they might be retaining you. Again, outcomes or testimonials, you want to make sure that you can't be generally, again, you have to check with but according to the ABA guidelines, it can't be with respect to a matter that's still pending, theoretically, because you can still mess up. If you've been paid, or if you've paid someone to give a particular testimonial, you need to state that, which kind of undermines any benefit that the testimonial might confer. Again, as with the results, you want to make sure prior results don't guarantee a similar outcome. There's kind of a catch-all with respect to ethics, which is any kind of statement that might be false or misleading. And that could be statements that might technically be true, but to an average user, they might be perceived, in a way that's misleading. So be careful, again, with words like specialized or expert. Comparisons is a very tricky area. Best, better, cheapest. You want to also be careful with images. Again, these are state specific, but make sure, if you don't want to present individuals that might be implied as clients, or there are some states that have rules against portrayal of judges or using actors to portray lawyers. So those could be problematic. Slogans are great. We do a lot of taglines for our clients. Obviously, you don't want to be too cheesy with them, but from an ethical standpoint, you don't want to imply an ability to obtain a particular result. And incidentally, that goes true for a lot of other things. Essentially, any kind of marketing that you do, you have to be careful about implying an ability to obtain a result. Another thing, you might be required to have your name, an address, and telephone number. And if you state that you speak a particular language, like Spanish, and you might only do so by appointment, or you might only do so at a particular office, some guidelines require you to explicitly state that information. Okay, this is again something else you need to check. Some states will require you to retain all your marketing materials, including your website. So digital is generally okay. As far as I understand, there is no specific requirement in terms of the format, i.e. whether it's digital or printed. But you definitely want to maintain copies of your website anytime you make a major change. And some states actually require you to do it at a minimum interval, even if you don't make a change. If your website platform allows you to automatically create revisions for any changes you make for your website, that's a great tool. That's kind of like you can set and forget, and not have to worry about having presented, having saved each copy. And of course, you want to make sure if it does have versioning, it does date stamp all the changes, so it can easily be backtracked. Okay. We talked a little bit about this, selecting a domain name for your practice. Number one, you want to keep SEO in mind. Having practice area keywords in there is very helpful. Of course, if you have multiple practice areas, that's definitely going to be more challenging. Having a geolocation keyword, like maybe a 2-letter state designation, can be helpful too. Thing with that is that if you do move, that could be a little bit of a problem because it's not as versatile. But then again, you might change your practice areas, throughout the life of your practice as well. And there are things you can do to kind of migrate a domain name while transferring any authority that it has. So don't get too freaked out about having to change it at some point in the future. But again, having some keywords in the domain name without making it too long can definitely help as far as search optimization. Again, this is obvious. It's becoming harder and harder to come up with, clever, pithy domain names that are memorable. But still, see if you can come up with, some creative way of assembling a name that wouldn't easily be mistaken. If you are of a particular ethnicity where, the last names are no shorter than 6 syllables, you may not want to use your last name. Again, the kind of test that I have for a domain name, if you come across a car, at a red light, and they ask you your domain name, and you pull down the window and you tell them, if they can remember it without having to write it down when they get back home or to their office, then that kind of passes the test. But one problem, for example, is a lot of attorneys are now using .net or .co domain names. Problem with that is people usually memorize the portion before the dot, and then when they go to punch in the domain name, they'll put in the .com automatically. So try to avoid that. And there is some authority that says that also .com names tend to be viewed with more authority by search engines versus, let's say, .nets. So just something to keep in mind. Strong preference for a .com. Again, things you need to kind of keep in mind in terms of domain names. Some states will require that it be some version of your firm name. So if you don't use it, some states will allow you to use a different name as long as your official firm name is very clearly written on top of every page. It can't. And by the way, if you can use, most states will allow you to use abbreviations of your name. So Smith and Jones, you can have S&J lawyers, S&J law, SJ law, Smith law, Jones law. So generally, when there is a restriction with respect to that, it's somewhat flexible. Again, don't imply an ability to obtain a particular result. And finally, some criteria to think about when you're looking to hire someone to build your firm's website. You want to make sure that they have a lot of experience working with law firms, and there are plenty of great companies online that'll do that. So you have plenty of choices out there in the market. I've noticed that some folks are tempted to go with a local provider, and I get that. I appreciate that. Number one, you want to support your community, and some people are also kind of like the physical proximity of just being, with any provider that they work with. But I think just the expertise of working with law firms is so important that it trumps any of those other considerations. Building a website takes so many different skill sets. It's not just about images. There's so many components to it. Of course, there's the coding of the website. There's the choice of images. There's layout. There's logo and branding. There's messaging. There's content, and it's very hard to find a Renaissance man or woman that kind of excels at all these skill sets. So you want to work with a company that has a team that'll work very cohesively together to kind of and bring together their wide range of expertise to create an effective presence for you. You also want to make sure that they provide unlimited design revisions. You don't want to kind of be stuck with something that you don't love, especially if you made a significant investment. You want to make sure that by the time the site is done, you absolutely love it and you can't wait to show it off. And finally, you want to make sure that you own the design. You don't want to have to kind of lease out, the design that's been done for you indefinitely, and you want to be able to kind of use the look and feel possibly on some other marketing materials. So I came up with a little quiz. Jared, are you there? Let's see if I can get Jared.
I know I promised I interrupted.
I'm not sure if you folks can chime in, but if any of you can identify some ethics issues with this or other issues that you notice with this website, if you can just maybe use your chat feature to tell me. Let's see if I think there are about 8 things that are wrong with this this example website. So if any of you want to chime in with some ideas.
If you're on the Zoom screen at the bottom, there's a chat tool that you can click on and you can send a response in that way. You can write to everybody and we'll see it. Hey, Fred, I know I promised I was going to interrupt you, but you were crushing it. That was great. And you were right on time.
Okay. Michael says legal cheese images. Yes. Thank you. Almost makes me nauseous. Okay, excellent. So Edward found issues. The domain name implies ability to obtain a result. Certification, there is none in New York, for example. Exactly. Premier could be dubious. I like that. I might steal that phrase. Thank you. Implies result. Very good. Thank you, Michael.
Anybody else? 6 more things, you said, right, Fred?
Okay, so there are a couple of other things that are, well, yeah, it doesn't grab you. Thank you, Carolyn.
Oh, here we go.
Typo on injury. Actually, that might have been injury, personal injury. I don't see the typo, but that was probably by mistake.
Oh, it's at the bottom of the page.
I see that at the bottom. Thank you. Yes. Yes, there is no firm name. Thank you, Michael. You caught that. Excellent.
Michael's
Excellent.
on point today.
And also, I normally present this at bar associations around New York, and New York has a requirement to state attorney advertising, not just advertisement. So that's kind of a trick one. But I think you guys got everything. This is excellent. And I think we're ready for the question and answer session. I don't know if Jared, if you're there, if you can chime in.
Yep, I'm here. I'm unmuted now. So, folks, if you have any questions, now is the time. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Okay. For some reason, I'm not hearing Jared, but I'll be happy to take your questions. Michael asks, is the firm name okay? I thought that was the firm name. I know, for example, in New York, you cannot use a fictitious firm name. It has to be some derivative of the existing founders or the prior founders of the firm. So that could be a problem with a lot of other states. Any other questions?
All right, now's your chance. If you got,
I'll just give you guys a couple more minutes if you have any other questions. If not, okay. I see a question here from Edward. Multi-state admission issues. What disclaimer to use if I have a principal office in Massachusetts but hold myself out as admitted? Well, I assume in your question that you're not admitted in New York, so that's a misleading statement if that's the case, if you're not admitted in New York. So that would kind of be a de facto ethics issue. Okay, so you're admitted in multiple states. What rules do you comply with? That's a great question. I would assume, and again, I would check with the local authority, but I would assume you would have to make a compliance with every jurisdiction in which you practice. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you guys. I think Jared is going to send out my contact information if you guys want to follow up with me with any other questions or follow-ups. I'm happy to answer them, or if you want to reach out to me personally, you can just look me up on our website, and I'm happy to have a chat with you personally as well. Thanks again. And Jared, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Great presentation. We appreciate it. Michael, I know you had a question that didn't get answered about website visibility. Send me an email at jared@masslowmap.org. That's JARED at MASSLOMAP.org. And I will get that message to Fred. That's JARED at MASSLOMAP. Fred and I were just having some issues communicating. So Ron asked, what's my background and position? I work for the Massachusetts LOMAP Office, Law Office Management Assistance Program, which is a free service for Massachusetts attorneys, and we host these webinars. Folks want to get in touch with me, you got my email. You can also check out our website at masslowmap.org. That's MASSLOMAP.org. Thanks for attending, and we will talk to you folks soon.